Mr. President, when my girls were little, and they're not little anymore, they're adults now. When they were little, I can remember at times I'd be working from the house in our little office space in the house, and one of the girls would crawl up in my lap, and she would look at me while I'm working on a computer, and she would say the same thing every time. "What you doing?" Every time. "What you doing?" I think about that when I think about the last 7 months here in the Senate. I have folks at home that'll look at the United States Senate and said, "What have you been doing for a while? What's that? What you doing?" What's been good is to be able to answer the question a lot. This has been the most productive beginning point for a new president in the first 7 months of a Senate in decades. Let me just walk through just a little bit of what we've been doing. We began this year by passing the Lake and Riley Act, which requires ICE to start arresting illegal migrants who have committed crimes. Amazingly enough, that wasn't a requirement before. We fixed that. We passed and made law the Take It Down Act. This is about revenge porn that we're seeing that has affected so many young lives, that they're posting their images and sometimes using AI to destroy the lives of people they either hate, use to date, or whatever it may be. We now passed that and made that federal law to be able to protect the youngest generation from that kind of vulnerability. We passed the Halt Fentanyl Act, permanently classifying fentanyl-related substances as Schedule I drugs. Amazingly, we had to do that year after year. It was always a challenge. We started dealing with fentanyl in the serious manner that it needs to be dealt with. We passed that and made that law. We passed the Genius Act, which puts the United States on the forefront of digital currency. This is not cryptocurrency. This is dealing with stablecoin. It's similar to a traveler's check, only in a digital form, to say dollar for dollar. This creates new competition for credit cards and online shopping. It creates a way to be able to do this, to be able to put the United States and American currency in the lead on the digital world while still protecting physical currency and guaranteeing physical American currency continues to exist. Just those alone would be significant to be able to begin out a session, but we're not close to being done. The Senate has held more than 440 votes just this year so far. That is more than most years of the Senate in total in the last 30 years. We've done just in the first 6 months. That's more votes at the beginning of any session since the Reagan administration. We began with 10 straight weeks, day after day after day, of just pounding away to be able to get stuff done. We've worked on nominations, as this body is still working on confirmations even right now. We've confirmed so far 119 of President Trump's nominees. To compare that to this same spot 8 years ago in the first term of the first Trump presidency, they had 56 that were done at this point. We've now done 119. We've done twice as many confirmations now as what we did under the first Trump administration, but we still have quite a few to go. This has been, though, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, for the past 7 months. You see, confirmations typically are done by voice vote here in the United States Senate because we have work to do on legislative work as well. Unlike the House, we do personnel and we do policy. We have to switch back and forth between the two often, but every time you're working on the personnel side, the confirmation side, every single nomination takes about 3 hours, both to file on them, to be able to go through the whole period. There's also a day of waiting for those. But those are typically done just for the high-profile nominees. They're not typically done for every nominee. There's about 1,200 people that have to be confirmed. So typically things are done by voice vote. Under President George W. Bush, 90% of his nominees were actually done by voice vote in the Senate. Under President Obama, 90% of those were done by voice vote. Under the first President Trump, 67% of his nominees were done by voice vote. So far in this Senate, zero. Zero. Every single nominee, even if it was the protocol officer for the State Department, or a legislative affairs person in an agency, or the deputy secretary assistant of something, literally that no American other than their family knows who they are, they've had to go through the full 3-hour process, the intervening day, to slow this down. That has not happened to any president ever in the history of the country, ever. No president has ever faced this kind of obstruction, ever, for their nominees. We've still done 119 of those by staying and working at night, by staying and working on weekends. We'll continue to be able to do this the hard way or the easy way, but quite frankly, President Trump should have the same respect of every other president in American history. They should be able to get to their staff. So we'll continue on this process. As we already have, we'll just keep moving through the process, because what we're doing is trying to get the work done for the United States Senate. We've taken on some issues that haven't been taken on in a long time. We did a rescissions package, not been done in 35 years. We not only talked about it, we passed it, we made it law. We as this body examined some areas that we said, this seems like wasteful spending to me, we shouldn't do it, literally voted, took it out, and saved the American taxpayers $9 billion from this year's budget. That's not happened in 35 years to be able to do that. How did we do that? Well, we identified some areas of waste in foreign aid and said, do we really need to have this as a top priority? We took away the funding that was used last year to create environmentally friendly reproductive health decision education for children in foreign countries. We took away the funding for the Iraqi Sesame Street and for the Malaysian Youth Climate Corps. We took away the funding that created the grant for vegan food in Zambia. We took away the funding for the Pride Festival in Southern Africa. We took away the funding for social media mentorships in Serbia and Belarus. We took away the funding for gender diversity for the Mexican street lighting industry. And we took away $1 billion of funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting that many people said, oh gosh, this is going to lead to the end of NPR and PBS, and it absolutely is not. Because NPR, 90% of it is funded by corporate and private funding already. This was the last 10%. Literally, this was something that was attempted to be done in 1983 under the Reagan administration to say, why do we have federally taxpayer-paid journalists? Why don't we have that in the free market? If it made sense in 1983, it certainly makes sense now. In 1983, there were about 4 channels. Now there are thousands. So what Reagan couldn't get done, we just got done. That's a pretty productive Senate, but we're not close to being done with the things that have already been accomplished just in the last 7 months. The One Big Beautiful Bill has been an interesting, big, beautiful conversation. The One Big Beautiful conversation is about what all is in it. Well, it's been public for a long time. The House passed it, and it was over 2 months before the Senate was able to take it up. And even when we took it up in the Senate, we brought it out committee by committee so everybody could see it, read it, review it. It was 940 pages, but it was very public for weeks. We wanted everyone to be able to see what's in it. But quite frankly, there was so much that got done in that bill that people are still digging through it and going, oh, I didn't know that happened. It's been interesting the number of people that I run into that say, I'm finding out more about the bill, and the more I find out about it, the more I'm grateful for its passage. It's been really encouraging when I get back home on weekends to be able to chat with folks. My favorite so far was when my wife and I had dropped by a Dollar Tree store, and I'm there at the cash register, and there's a very nice lady who looked like she was in her mid-70s, and we were chit-chatting, and she said to me, I saw you on the news explaining the bill. I've looked at it even more, and I am so grateful because as a working senior, I'm going to get a big benefit for my taxes, and I need the help. And then she smiled at me and she said, you put some new work requirements into that bill. Thank you, because everybody needs to work like I do. It's a great conversation, actually, to be able to chat with her and to be able to hear that she gets it. This bill and the things that we're able to work in, we did a lot of things that we've tried to do for a long time we were able to get done. One of the things that I worked on a lot was the issue of what's called full expensing. This is used by a lot of manufacturers and a lot of small businesses. You see, when they buy a big piece of equipment, they're allowed to be able to write off the expense over several years. Well, that works for their taxes except for the first year often, and it's a killer for them. Because when they get a big new piece of equipment, they often have to borrow money to pay their taxes that year because they can't afford to get both a new piece of equipment and still pay their taxes and the other expenses. So they either don't get the new equipment or they have to delay to do it. What does that do? That decreases productivity. It makes no difference to the federal income in the Treasury to say you get to write it off in 1 year or you get to write it off in several years, but it makes a huge difference to that small business or that manufacturer to say the year you have the big expense is also the year you get to write it off. We got that done. And not only did we get that done, we made that permanent tax policy to say it is just the right thing to be able to do, to say when a business has a major expense, they get to write that expense off in the year that it happens like every other expense. For years, I've worked on an issue about charitable giving. The top 9% of Americans can write off their charitable giving. Everyone else cannot. I think that's wrong. I've always thought that was wrong. We were able to put in this year into the One Big Beautiful Bill, a bill that I had to be able to make sure that if you give to a nonprofit, you're able to write that expense off completely. You're able to write that off and to say this expense up to $2,000 is a deduction on their taxes. That's helpful to every single nonprofit. That's helpful to every single taxpayer that actually gives to nonprofits or their church, whatever charity. It makes a big difference to be able to do that. We didn't just talk about that, we actually got that done. The no tax on Social Security for seniors, I've already talked about. The tax credit for businesses that create a child care facility on site to encourage more child care facilities and to be able to do it closer to the workplace. That's very beneficial for their families. Extending the paid family medical leave, that's something we were able to get done, not just talk about, we were able to get done. My Democratic colleagues and President Biden created a new requirement that if you have more than $600 that you do on Venmo or PayPal, you have to have a whole new reporting system in the IRS. Well, it drove Americans crazy to say, what in the world? Why do I have to do that new reporting system? For many families, that's how they'll reimburse their kids or another family member for a purchase or whatever it may be. But if you exceed $600, you're going to have to now do a new IRS reporting for it. You know what we got done this year? We killed that and said that's ridiculous. People shouldn't have to be able to report all that, what's actually happening in their Venmo and PayPal back and forth with their family members. That's not something that the IRS needs to be able to track. For family farms, we were able to do a significant amount of the Farm Bill already, a change in reference prices and a lot of the different programs that were desperately in need of an upgrade. We didn't just talk about that as we have for several years, we actually got that done. We also fixed the death tax. That's something that was about to expire, and a lot of folks on family farms, they may be liquidity poor, but they're asset rich. They've got land, they've got tractors. And the fear is always for their family, when the family passes away, that the kids are gonna have to sell the farm just to be able to pay the taxes. Well, you know what? We fixed that for family farms and finally got that done. This has been an incredibly busy season. We improved and modernized air traffic control. We not only talked about that, we got that finished to allow additional funding to be able to modernize that system, which people all over the country have looked for. We're modernizing our Navy. We finally got the opportunity to be able to modernize our Coast Guard, which has been in desperate need literally for decades for improvement along our ports. We were able to make changes on our southern border. Now, I've passed on several different bills that I've actually filed that we're working through the process on to be able to do more inspections southbound, more inspections northbound. But in the meantime, we were able to add new border walls. We were able to add new border patrol agents, new ICE agents, new detention facilities. We've not just talked about those things, we've actually passed it and made it law. Those things are done. It's been an incredibly busy season. When I was in May at the Otay Mesa Port of Entry in California, right along the border with Mexico, it's one of the busiest ports in the world. I could see the infrastructure problems that were there. When I visited with the Coast Guard when I was there off the coast, I talked to them about the challenges that they have with the land port of entry being so closed now and so few people, thankfully, even trying to cross our southern land borders. Now literally people are getting on jet skis in Baja California and trying to head out to the ocean to try to land in San Diego, and our Coast Guard is the one that's interdicting that. So I was able to work through a process this year to be able to upgrade the radar system, the camera systems, all the things they desperately need for the Coast Guard. We didn't just talk about that this year. When I came back in May, we worked on the process and actually got that done, got that passed into law. That's funded, and now that technology is being added that is desperately needed to be able to secure our southern border. Those are the things that need to get done, that is getting done this year. I'm grateful to be able to see the things that we've been able to work through the process on. We still have multiple things to do, but we have multiple things in process. For instance, I've worked on cell phone jamming reform issues for years in our prisons. Tom Cotton and I have partnered together on this to be able to find a way to be able to block those illegal cell phones in our federal and state prisons and our local county jails that are smuggled in, that are used to be able to literally stalk victims outside of the prison. That's got to stop. We're working through the process to be able to make sure that's available, because we want to make sure that we can actually put an end to that. I've introduced an act, Protecting Children Over Profits is what it's called. This deals with tech companies that when law enforcement has to do a subpoena, when there's child abuse or child pornography on their site, those tech companies that by their rules are not supposed to have that at all, those tech companies then charge local law enforcement to be able to do the search for it. That's got to end. They know they're just creating a disincentive to local law enforcement to even follow up on that. It's not supposed to be there at all. So we're finding a way to be able to get rid of that. Something else that really has come up that dealt with our rural nursing homes. For our rural nursing homes, they've had a real challenge because the Biden administration put in a new rule that had new requirements for additional nurses and personnel. That all sounds really good, but in most rural nursing homes, they flat out don't have the people to be able to do it. So that was leading to the closing of rural nursing homes. We were able to reverse that and to be able to say that should not be that way. Allow the rural nursing homes to be able to handle their staffing and to be able to stay in business. The last thing we want is a closure of rural nursing homes and that people to get nursing care have to travel 50, 100 miles to be able to get to it. That means their family can't connect with them. We didn't just talk about that. We were able to get that done. This year, it's been fun working on a lot of specific Oklahoma projects. Anyone that's in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that drives down I-44 right now will often drive down and see these bridge supports that those of us around Tulsa affectionately call Tulsa Stonehenge. It's been up for quite a while, those bridge supports, but no bridge is actually on top of them, and it does look like a modern Stonehenge. You know what? We were able to secure the funding to actually get that finished. So we don't just have bridge supports up in one of the busiest intersections in all of Oklahoma. We're able to get that intersection done. If you're in southern Oklahoma, you know the Roosevelt Bridge, and if you ever traveled across it, you have white knuckles. A bridge that's named the Roosevelt Bridge because it was built during the Roosevelt administration. That bridge is still one of the most important bridges in southern Oklahoma, crossing over Lake Texoma. School buses and semis and families that are coming back and forth on vacation, folks coming back and forth to work, literally have a high-risk encounter every time they cross that bridge. We were able to get the funding secured for that to finally start the process of replacing that bridge. It's in desperate need to actually get done. We were able to get so many things done this year, and we're halfway through the year. One quick story, Mr. President. I'm so incredibly proud of a lot of our caseworkers that are back home. We focus on the needs and the constituents in Oklahoma. The field staff that we have traveling around the state do a remarkable job helping people problem solve. But I have to highlight one quick story. We had a veteran that was 106 years old. He was a World War II veteran. He was in Edmond, Oklahoma. He had actually never received his medals after he served in World War II. Never. His family had thought about it, and he had thought about it for a long time. But the records were long gone. So my team jumped on it. We did the research, worked with the United States Army, able to track down some very old World War II records, and were able to get to Mr. McGregor his medals. And it made it even more fun because we were able to deliver them to him just over a month ago on Father's Day weekend, when his whole family was able to come in and was able to stand there with him as he, that World War II veteran, finally received the medals and the gratitude from a grateful nation. It's an honor to be able to work on so many tax policy issues and other things, but it's an absolute privilege to be able to honor people worthy of honor. And there's a bunch of great Oklahomans like that. We have more to do, and we'll keep going on this, but it's been a great start to a year, but we're just getting started. With that, I yield the floor.